So I got this huge amount of art supplies that have been laying around, unused, for years now. I figured it's time to actually try them out. But first I'll sort them. Oh, don't move. Don't yell, no, I'm not going to let you into that room. After I identified them and got a bunch that belongs together, I used tape to turn it into a set. Like that, they have been sorted into 21 sets of art supplies. 2185 something something roller gel pen probably. But what am I going to do with them? Well, I made 2 picker wheels. One with the 21 art supplies and one with themes. The wheels will randomly pick from both, and I make an art piece of the combination, while giving my opinion on each of the art supplies, basically turning this into a challenge as well as a review series. So without further ado, let's take a look at what the first set is going to be. Oh, there it goes, there it comes, there it comes. Oh gosh, that music. So the picker wheel has decided what materials we're going to use. And the result is Pilot FriXion markers. The thing with these markers is though, that they're extremely light. They're like, not necessarily markers, but highlighters. I got this professional drawing paper of 158 grams. So we're going to grab one of these. And on this paper, I made some swatches to see how the highlighters react with the paper and the different pens. So if we take a little bit of a closer look, as you can see on the pink, it smudges. Faber-Castell also smudges at the top there, as you can see. It's up to these two. I actually liked the Artline a lot, so I'm going to use the Artline for the art. Then as for the colors, because they are quite light, I am just wondering if we can layer them on top of each other and see if there's any way to make the color a little bit more saturated. Rough. Okay. It was definitely necessary to experiment some more before I started on the big piece, which is going to be a drawing of a wolf's eyes. I had been thinking about how I could utilize these highlighters best to make a piece of a wolf. Should I simply color the wolf? No, the shading wouldn't work with these light colors. How about something abstract or similar to stained glass? Not within my comfort zone, nor could I imagine how I'd make it work. Then I thought of how these colors could work anyway in a more realistic piece, and that's when I thought of a close-up of the eyes. I looked up some images and started sketching on scrap paper before transferring to the paper I wanted to use. I do this transferring in order to prevent the paper from getting damaged by all the sketching and erasing that I do, and also to make sure that the proportions are right beforehand. Then it was finally time to actually draw it. First I erased the lines that I had made before, so they are barely visible. Then I use tiny lines to draw what I want to draw. I personally feel very comfortable using pens in this way, like making lots of small lines, and that just happens to work out very well with realistic pieces, especially in these kinds of pieces with creatures that have fur and stuff. With small lines you can really make it look like the fur is standing in a certain direction, all the individual hairs that is. What's also important is to find like places that you can focus on, places on the reference that have a certain pattern to it that you can always relate to like estimate the distance between other parts on the piece itself. So you can make a more correct piece, like to make it more similar to the actual reference you're using. Another fun thing with the small lines tactic that I use is that it's not very, it looks precise, and it is also quite precise, but because of the many lines in one area, it's also okay if they overlap or if they're not perfect. Because in the end, it will look like it is meant to be like that. After I made the first eye, I started on the second eye. This is why it was so important to do the pre-sketch, because lots of artists will know that making 2 identical eyes or 2 eyes that are working with each other is a really difficult thing to do. So if you sketch beforehand and make sure that those proportions are right, in like a normal sketch you don't have to be afraid to make mistakes. But in a drawing like this with a pen, it is scary to make mistakes. So if you did the mistaking beforehand, it will be way easier to not make mistakes anymore. At this one part, I thought I had made a terrible mistake with these darker lines. I saw them on the reference and I thought it would be best to make it like as realistically as possible, to make it like as similar as possible to what I see. But yeah, it looked very odd in this stage. But at that point, I just always tell myself, keep going. Definitely with this kind of drawing, with this style of drawing, you definitely have to trust the process. Even if you feel like it's not going well or it's not how you wanted it to look, believe in yourself and in your lines. And here I could not find any focal points because the hairs in the middle between the eyes, they're all just kind of waving in a direction, yes, but there are no focal points, there are no darker spots, there are no spots with hairs to all sides, there are no lighter spots. So it's very difficult to find that point to like get a feel for the piece, for the distance in the piece. So what I did is I was trying to see which areas were a little bit darker than other areas and draw it in with a pencil, so I could at least have a little bit of a sense of in what direction the fur is going, or where I should stop putting them in this certain direction and continue putting them in a different direction, which is up, but some parts are a little bit up to the left and some parts a little bit up to the right and some parts straight up and smaller because perspectives, I don't know. Anyway, now that these 3 hours have been condensed into a few minutes, we're finally getting to the colors. Or well, first some shading with a pencil. I didn't want to do this after I colored the eyes because the paper can't handle the smudging and erasing on top of the highlighters. That we found out with the test paper. If I would layer like that, the paper would actually get damaged. Now we're really using the highlighters. And this is the perfect time to actually review them. After using them continuously during testing, I noticed that the colors got a bit more saturated, which is nice. But in the end, these are more like office supplies than art supplies. The chisel tip is small, and the color can be erased with friction, hence the name FriXion, which can be useful, but as we concluded before, this paper cannot really handle several layers of this, let alone the friction from the eraser end. And this is 158 grams art paper. Perhaps thicker paper or a different texture would be able to handle it, but would you want to use these on expensive surfaces? It's fun to try things out with, sure. But it's not that good. It's not made for art pieces. That doesn't mean that you can't use them though. Challenges are always fun, and these definitely pose a challenge. The light colors don't blend well, and they're all around the same value. That makes their use quite limited since you can't really use them for shading or make different things. But at the same time, it's also very rewarding when it works out like with this piece. I don't see many more uses that would result in nice art pieces, personally, so I'll keep them in my pencil case, but not around my art supplies.